You ever have a day where so much happens and it's so dynamic that you get to the end of it and you look back and you're like, wow, I started this morning under these circumstances. That is insane. This one time I was working in rural Zambia in South Central Africa, and I started the day there out on this campus out in the bush. I then drove down this thing that you could barely call a road, hopped on a flight. I went to Dubai and ate some food there at this gigantic terminal. Then I flew from there to, what was it that day? Frankfurt? I think I went to Frankfurt, Germany. And then I flew from there to New York, and I ate in both Germany and New York. Then I flew to Denver, Colorado. Then when I got off the plane in Denver, I just thought, I got enough energy. Let's just do it. And I powered through the darkness to drive all the way back up to my home, which at that point was by Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. And I got to the end of it as I collapsed into bed and thought, this day, which is all scrambled because of time zones and everything, started in rural Africa and touched down in all those different places. I had breakfast in Africa, second breakfast in Dubai, lunch in Frankfurt, second lunch in New York, dinner in Denver, and now I am in my own bed in Lander, Wyoming. That is just nuts. But it was a fun kind of crazy to sit there and appreciate how much had happened in just effectively one day of time. Likewise, today, I would like to stop and appreciate how much has happened in the book of Esther in just one day of time. Think about how young and naive we all were one page earlier at Esther's first banquet when we got Xerxes there and Haman there and Esther there, and King Xerxes is all enchanted because he hasn't seen Esther in a long time, and she just shows up unannounced in his royal courtroom, and he's like, wow, that's right. You are lovely, and you just got a way about you. It is great to see you. What would you like? I just want to have dinner with you and your right-hand man there, Haman. And they all get together for dinner, and the king's just tickled and enchanted. He's like, all right, so what is this about? What are you doing? What do you need? She's like, no, I'll tell you, but let's do another banquet. And as we've been discussing for the last couple of weeks, because the story kind of follows Haman's story out the door from there, he leaves there in high spirits. He cooks up a plan to kill Mordecai the Jew. He has a gallows built. He gets up the next morning to go and borrow the king's signet ring to declare an execution for Mordecai. And then things go south. He ends up having to take Mordecai on a parade honoring him and has to shuffle through the back alleys with the hood over his head to go home and lick his wounds with his wife and his friends, who totally turn on him. And even despite them being biased in his favor, they're like, dude, you're cooked. There's nothing anybody can do. And so Haman, now as we enter chapter 7 and are ready to go to Esther's second banquet, 24 hours after this last banquet, he's a completely different man. He's broken. He's alone. He was on top of the world. Now he's skulking around in gutters. Did he even have time to properly clean up for this banquet? This guy is a frazzled mess with no composure at this point. His nerves are frayed, and you got to think the slightest little thing is going to set off the paranoia and the instability that he is feeling right now. He is not who he was just a day earlier when he left Esther's last banquet. He is very vulnerable right now to making huge mistakes. His compass is spinning. So that's Haman. Where's Mordecai in this 24-hour stretch? Well, he was sad, probably sitting in sackcloth and ashes still outside the king's gate doing his thing, listening in on stuff. And then with no warning or rhyme or reason, totally unaware, he's probably out there wondering if Xerxes received Esther. He doesn't know. Is she exiled? Is she dead? Are they on a date? How would I even know? I'm just going to sit out here at the king's gate because this is the thing in the world I am most interested to know, and this is as close as I can get to the information. Maybe she'll need me, and if she does, what if I weren't here? I need to be sitting right here in case there's anything I need to do. Maybe I'll hear something that could help her. That's the only role Mordecai can play. He's not in control of the situation. And then, as he sits there probably through the whole night because he couldn't leave his post, out comes, of all people, Haman the next day with no word on the status of Esther or anyone else. And Mordecai squints as Haman is like, I need you to get on this horse. Wait, what? I need you to get on this horse. That's the king's horse. I need you to get on this horse. By the king's order, you are to be honored in a parade led by me. Also, I'm going to need you to put on this robe. What? Actually, I'm supposed to put the robe on you. Okay. And I have to imagine that Mordecai, as he's being led around on the parade, is like, this is pretty cool. But anytime he starts to get swept up in it, I'm guessing that he looks back over his shoulder. And anytime he goes down a street that's parallel to the king's gate at the palace, I'm guessing he's straining to look down at like a kid in 1980s Kmart who's lost his mom and is trying to use the length of each aisle to catch a glimpse of her as she passes by. He's squinting to try to see if there's any commotion at the palace or anything going on. And maybe deep down he's like, could we just get this parade over with? This isn't really what I need to be doing right now. I mean, I certainly wouldn't blame him if he also just relished in the whole thing, but there's no way that he was forgetting about what was going on. And so as soon as his parade is done, the text tells us toward the end of chapter 6, afterward Mordecai returned to the king's gate. That's all there was. Right back to it. Couldn't keep him away. Going to get to his post in case there's anything that he can do. We know a lot about Xerxes' previous 24 hours. A lot's happened for him in there as well. He's just having a fun banquet with a wife he kind of forgot about for a while, and it's just great, and she's wonderful. And for some reason, he just can't sleep that night, and he hangs out with the most interesting person in the world, his royal chronicler, who reads him the most interesting thing in the world, the royal chronicles, and he realizes there's an oversight. I got to take care of Mordecai the Jew. And so he stays up all night and gets that gross feeling you get when you realize you've done that and the sun comes up and you're like, I didn't get any sleep, whatever. But he's still alert enough to be like, we got to honor Mordecai the Jew. And so he pulls the trigger on that. So you've got a sleep-deprived king who now seemingly completely by chance has the Jews, and favorably has the Jews, on the tip of his mind. He probably had to limp through his morning responsibilities a little bit, but probably caught a second wind in the afternoon, and now is very ready to just recline and relax and let his guard down with his wife and with his right-hand man, his buddy Haman, who, as he walks in, seems a little bit out of sorts. And then finally, we got to check in with the other of our four main characters, the big one, Queen Esther herself. She gets done with that banquet. She goes back to her chambers and has to feel really good about how phase one of her plan went. I think she very likely would have been kept awake that night, wondering what the construction sounds in the distance were, and having not a good feeling about that. And maybe somewhere in there she did even find a way to send a messenger, a eunuch who's favorable to her, out to the king's gate to let Mordecai know about the progress. Maybe not. I have to imagine that she woke up the next morning with nervous energy and went about the business of planning with her attendants how to put together the best banquet possible for that night, the banquet that would put the king in the best of mindsets. I'm sure she got some inside information on the king and that he had a sleepless night because it looks like people are feeding Esther information to set her up for success. Maybe she got wind of the situation with Mordecai and the gallows and Haman. Maybe she did not. Either way, she can't act like she knows or it's going to break the entire thing when she gets in the room. She can't be ecstatic. She can't be nervous. She has to comport herself with queenly, courtly discipline and elegance as she hosts this banquet, waiting until just the right moment to turn over her cards. There's some saying that I don't remember exactly and can't quote properly, but it's like sometimes you go 20 years with no meaningful history happening in any way, and then sometimes 20 years worth of history happens in a week. Well, I think that applies here. This 24-hour period in a 1-year-long saga, maybe in a 10-year-long saga, maybe you could argue this is a 1,000-year-long saga if you go back to the beginning of the rivalry between the Agagites and the Jewish people. Whatever big picture chunk of time you want to consider there, this 24-hour period is going to be decisive, and it's not just a clean ramp up for all four of these characters. Huge things are happening in their lives. They are under massive, formative, life-changing pressures in this 24-hour period, and now one of them is sitting at the gate ready for action, changed from who he was a day before, and the other three are getting set to go into this banquet. All three of them changed from who they were the night before. On paper, it would be easy to mistakenly imagine that this is just a repeat of what we did yesterday, but this is not the same. All the pieces have been moved. The tension could not be higher, and we'll find out what happens tomorrow. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.